Good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. We are about to start a webinar about how to respond to COVID-19 in the IT and business process outsourcing sector. We will have 1 or 2 minutes before we start, but this is so that everybody can already get to know the system, etc. I will get back to you in 1 minute. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome again for those who already heard my message before. Welcome to this webinar. It's now 11 o'clock in the morning in the Netherlands, so we will start this session. This webinar is about how to respond to COVID-19 in the IT and business processes outsourcing sector. This webinar is organized by CBI, the Center for the Promotion of Imports from Developing Countries from the Netherlands. We are part of the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, and we are funded by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But we also conduct programs for the European Union, among others. My name is Sanne Bogers. I'm a Program Manager Market Intelligence at CBI. And I'm also responsible for the outsourcing sector. Well, CBI offers a range of market intelligence on the European market for 14 sectors. So this ranges from fresh fruit and vegetables to apparel and tourism, but also to IT and BP outsourcing. Our market intelligence is especially aimed at exporters from developing countries. It is free and it contains a lot of practical tips on how to enter the European market. Today we are here to present a very special study that we have made in the context of the pandemic that we are facing at the moment, COVID-19. This study has been written by our external expert for this sector, Peter Vogelaar. And it is a kind of step-by-step approach how to respond to the situation if it impacts your business a lot. What are the actions you could take at this moment, and what are actions to prepare for a future after COVID-19? I'm very glad that so many of you are joining today. We have about 19 registered participants. At the moment, still people are joining the webinar. People are here from all over the world, including Senegal and Uganda, where we have support programs at the moment. Also, people registered from Egypt, where we intend to start up a new support program in the future. And many of you are registered through our partner organization, ITC, the International Trade Center, especially from Sri Lanka. So welcome, everyone. Very happy to have you all here. Then about this webinar. This webinar will take 75 minutes. So after my introduction, Peter Vogelaar will give a presentation of about 40 minutes on the study. And then well, the PowerPoint presentation will be sent to you afterwards. After the presentation, we have some 20 to 25 minutes to answer the questions that you have. We will make a selection of the questions that you pose in the question box. So yeah, I hope you can all see your question or chat box, and there you can put in your questions, and that we will answer after the presentation. And before we then close the session, I will give a little bit more information about the market intelligence that we offer, especially for this sector. Well, I hope you can all see the presentation on your screen. As I already mentioned, this presentation will be sent to you after the presentation, so the PowerPoint will be sent to you. Yeah, before we start, we would like to do a little poll on the impact of COVID-19 thus far on your business. So I will launch a poll now, and you should be able to see that in your screen. And the question is, how has COVID-19 impacted your business thus far? We are curious if it has been having negative effects or positive effects, or not yet an effect. So curious to see your responses. We are collecting the responses at the moment. Let me see. Almost 80% of the participants has voted at this moment. We'll wait for a few seconds. Okay, so I will show the results. Let me see. So 60% of you says it has impacted your business negatively. 30% says it has impacted your business not yet, and 10% says positively. So, well, I'm happy that at least some of you have received some new opportunities. And for the people who has for who COVID-19 has been having a negative effect, I hope that from this webinar you will learn a lot, and that you can turn it into a positive impact, or at least to reduce the negative impact. So good. Let me see. I'm trying to yes, trying to get back to the PowerPoint presentation. And I'm looking now what one can see. Okay, good. Then I hope the technique is working for everyone. Otherwise, let me know through the questions or the chat box. And I would like to give the floor now to Peter Vogelaar. I wish you all a very interesting and useful webinar.
Well, welcome from my side as well. For some of you, it's early morning, but for others already in the afternoon. And it's nice to see that, I mean, we have participants from 3 continents. So a really international audience. I'll quickly introduce myself, and then I'll talk about COVID-19 and the impact of it for a while. But this is going to be a hands-on webinar. So what we would like to do is, I mean, share with you information that you could use today, but also look at, I mean, what you need to do in the near and in the long future. About myself, I have been working for CBI already for more than 10 years, but I'm an entrepreneur. I've had an IT company myself, but also had a call center in South Africa. I've been on the boards of a large number of companies in more than 10 countries. But I love doing this. At this moment, I'm involved in a program for CBI in both Senegal and Uganda. Okay, can we have the next slide, Sanne? This is a little bit, to show how the world looks like, and it's a bit of a different picture than what you normally see. This is to do with the fact that the world has changed, in my view, quite dramatically. If you look at this sheet, it says the COVID deaths versus the number of inhabitants, and you can see Europe is huge, as well as the US. But in my view, you could ask the question, where is Africa, for example? It's hardly there. Now, what you need to find from this map is that there's a lot of uncertainty and unclarity in terms of the COVID. There are no experts, so I'm introduced as an expert maybe on the business side, but I'm definitely not an expert in terms of COVID, and I hardly think that there are any people that are really an expert. There is a lot of uncertainty in the market of what's going to happen. Now, one thing is for sure, of course, it will have an impact on economies already, and also potentially longer term. Now, most of the uncertainty is about, what type of effect will it have on our economies? Some people think that it will be a kind of V shape, so we go down very quickly, but we could also go up very quickly. But there are a lot of other people that think that we will go down very rapidly, but we will come up very slowly, so it will be a long-term recession. Nobody knows at this point in time. I just looked before we started at the New York Times, and you see that the situation, for example, in the US is worsening, where we would have thought, that country, should be in a position, to handle what's happening. But some of the restrictions that the government has imposed, they've been taken away too early, and then you see the effect in terms of the numbers. And by now, the US is the country that's hit hardest so far by COVID. But will this mean that this is the situation in a month's time? Nobody knows. Will Africa, remain as it is, so hardly hit? Or is it still to come? There are a lot of questions about, is there potentially a second wave coming up? So we've seen in Europe that pretty quickly, the first wave was handled. So we're now in a situation in terms of Europe that people are allowed to go on holiday, for example. They can go to restaurants, they can go to bars. But if we look at certain other countries, they're quite far from it. And there's also the question, of course, will it come back in a second wave? The question is also, will there be a vaccine at all? So it is not clear. It could be something like what we've seen with the HIV, where there is a treatment, but there is no vaccine. So maybe we have to live, with COVID-19 for a very long period of time. Will it destroy the earth? No. The world has seen the plague in the Middle Ages. We've seen the Spanish flu, we've seen Ebola. Of course, the economy will recover. The question is, how long will it take? What we've seen so far is that in Europe and the US, a lot of dead people, were over 80 years old. So the question is it an age-related thing, or is it something that's going to expand more and more? Well, my idea is that it will go away, of course, and it's the uncertainty about what's happening which is hampering, economic recovery. So over time, will we be able, to handle what's happening with COVID? But there will be changes. Some of the effects that you already see is that, and this is not so much to do with IT or call centers, but if you look at production, a lot of companies in Europe and the US are rethinking, their sourcing. So they've seen that the fact that China closed down in the early stages meant that there were no supplies. So the question is, should you move your production closer to your markets? or have it done by robots. That's one of the things that, in my view, will potentially change. So can we go to the next slide, Sanne? Well, can you influence the crisis yourself? No, I mean, you're just part of it, and you need to handle it. But can you prepare yourself? Yes, you can. And I think it's essential that you write a crisis plan. Well, most of you will have a business plan or an export marketing plan, but this was to do with, I mean, the situation before COVID actually started. So you need to look at the world again and look at it with a crisis point of view in mind. So typically you should think of short-term, medium-term, and a longer-term plan just to deal with the uncertainty. This could take a month, this could take a half a year, this could also take a year. And you should at least build some scenarios that, I mean, will handle all these cases, just to prepare yourself in terms of thinking of what needs to be done. Now, before we go into this, there is one question that I normally raise with any company that I talk in terms of, I mean, can we help you? And this is to do the fact, should you continue at all? Before you go in taking measures, for certain companies, I mean, this is the moment to stop your company completely. Well, not, I mean, the subject that I love to talk about, but sometimes it is, I mean, the best way out before you lose. And I've seen this happen to a number of companies. Before you lose all your money, all your assets, I mean, sometimes it's better to stop today. So if your crisis plan, which you should do, I mean, pretty quickly, shows you that it's going to be too hard for you, then better stop before you burn all your cash. And maybe you should just, I mean, consider doing something completely different. Now, the good thing is that, I mean, this audience is about IT and business process outsourcing. These are typically the market segments that are doing reasonably well. So let's go from the assumption, I mean, that you've passed this point, you still see a future for yourself, and you don't want to stop. Now, how can the company survive? This is all about continuity. So most of your plans have been about growth. How can I grow my company into new markets? This crisis plan, I mean, should be about how can I continue my business, I mean, to survive this crisis. And you have to be honest to yourself. I mean, this is not a plan which, I mean, you're going to conquer the world or you're going to be the best of. This is about, I mean, how I still do business in a couple of months' time. You already see the sheet, the continuity of your business, and let's start with cash is king. This is of course very clear. At this moment, cash is very important in any company, and you will see that, I mean, you need to pay a lot of attention towards, I mean, your cash. So your cash flow statement, which you're going to make as part of your crisis plan, is extremely important because it will show you how long you can survive, even, I mean, if your cash is diminishing. Now, there are a couple of things that, I mean, that will influence, of course, your cash position. One of them is, of course, I mean, your revenue. Now, it's good to see that some of the companies in the poll already said that, I mean, they had positive effects of COVID-19, which is good because that will have a positive effect on your cash flow. But most, as was to be expected, I mean, had a negative impact, which will probably mean that your revenue is slowing down. That means that you need to look at your cost side, and I'll go into that, I mean, in a minute. But it's still good to look at your revenue side. One of the things that's hard, and I know this from the companies that I've been talking to, is, I mean, to get your bills paid. And you should not be reluctant in really trying to push, I mean, your debtors, I mean, to pay their bills. Now, everybody's in the status that they don't want to pay bills, but you need to be very harsh on the people that owe you money, I mean, to get it in. Specifically, I think if it's government related, you should push them hard, because this is, I mean, a very important part of, I mean, being able to continue your business. Sometimes, but this is differing from country to country, there are governments that will help you and give you a subsidy or a specific loan. That's something, I mean, you should definitely have a look at because it will, of course, I mean, increase your cash position. It's not easy, but it's something that you need to pay attention to, and don't give up too easily in terms of getting your bills paid. Now, somewhat more easy, I mean, in terms of a short period of time, is to minimize your costs and expenses. Now, typically in this industry, the major cost component you would have is salaries. So typically you need to look at your staff. So one of the things companies typically start looking at is, I mean, temporary staff that you have. I mean, can we stop it? But you could also look at, I mean, firing people that are permanent, of course. And normally, my experience shows is that companies are waiting too long because they, of course, care about their own staff. So you would like to keep them as long as possible. But I mean, keep in mind that continuity of your company is even more important than keeping a number of your staff. So your plan should show, if needed, how many people you need to fire. And then if you need to do it quickly, because it will help you in terms of continuity. Now, one of the ways to look at your staff is, of course, I mean, to look at, I mean, who came in latest and first in, first out, that type of stuff. But you should look at it in a somewhat different way, in my view. One of the things to look at is, are there certain projects within your company that are not bringing you money at this point in time, or where you're actually losing money? Well, typically you should look at keeping the people that are working on your products or services that bring in most of your money. So if you have started up a new project a couple of months ago, it will take some time before you see cash coming in. Yeah, then this is typically the area where I would look, I mean, to fire people. What you should, in my view, very good keep in mind is that you look at your processes. So you may want to fire certain people, but you need to look at your process in the sense that you need to keep it alive. So sometimes you need certain people which have a very important position within your company. And you need to keep them to keep your process alive. So you need to be smart. Maybe you can combine certain things that people are doing and keep them with one person, but you need to be sure that your processes are still there. Another thing to look at is sometimes you can outsource some of the components of your processes. So let's assume that you have more than one people working in finance. Maybe you could partly outsource that to an accountant or somebody else. In that sense, I mean, you could lower your cost. Now there are salaries, but there are also other parts, of course, the remunerations for your staff. So I would say that don't pay out any bonuses. Look at your allowances for travel, for example. A lot of your people will work from home, I assume, at this point in time. So then you could skip the travel allowance. The good thing is that people are normally pretty much aware of what's happening within the company. So where normally if you would do something like this, you take away the bonus, which you guaranteed, people would of course object, and that would be completely fair. But everybody understands that, I mean, the situation we are in now is very much different than anything anybody has ever seen. So people are willing, I mean, to consider these things. And this could be, I mean, you don't get it at all, but could also mean that, I mean, we will give it to you later when the business will recover. Now, another thing to look at is look at your taxes. There are programs where the government will allow you to pay tax later. make full use of them, of course, because that will improve your cash position. Another thing to look at, if you look at your staff, is to limit the number of working hours. So let's assume that somebody works for 45 hours a week. Maybe you could reduce it to 35, for example. If that allows you, to keep people with you, that's also an option, and could mean that you don't have to fire anybody. Again, this is something that you should communicate clearly, what your intention is, what the position of your company is, and that it is your intention, to keep these people within the company, because your view is that, the company will recover over time. A major other cost is normally your the rent of your office. Now, we've seen in Europe that almost all companies, have been able to renegotiate the terms of the rent of their office. And this could either go from we pay less or to we pay later, or a part we will pay later. This is typically an area where you could be successful, and maybe you need to threaten your landlord by just saying, look, we can't pay this anymore. We will stop renting the office from you. We will work from home, but there's definitely room, to renegotiate the terms. And typically the easiest way is to postpone your rent, or you would, for example, pay 25% of your original rent and say, look, if my business improves, we will pay even more. Because remember, you're not the only one in this situation. Everybody, is having the same type of issues. Another thing, to do is to delay other payments. Now, this is typically what everybody's doing, because you will have problems in getting your bills paid. But you could try to delay whatever bills you get in. So this could range from electricity to other stuff. But you need to be careful that you, for example, if it's to do with electricity, you don't want to be cut off. So you need to be careful there. But there's definitely room, to delay your payments, which should improve, your cash position. Sometimes it's good to rethink your activities. I would still think about, the office. Do you need an office at all? So you will see that a lot of companies, will work partially from home, and it's actually doing pretty okay. So what we see here in Europe is that a lot of companies are already rethinking the use of offices. So maybe, over time, you don't need, to have as many square meters as you would have today. Can we go to the next slide, Sanne? Now, the other way, to get more money into your company is to increase your working capital. So far we've thought about, the more easy part, and maybe I'm underestimating it a little bit, because it's not that easy, of course. But another way to get cash into your company, which basically means that you can survive longer term, is to increase your working capital. Now, typically, I would look at your shareholders first. Now, not everybody, is having a multiple of shareholders, but I think from a shareholder point of view, everybody would understand that in order, to continue your business, you may want to have more share capital. Now, for some of you, you're the full and only shareholder, which means it comes to yourself. So there again is, of course, the question, are you willing to do it? Because, if you believe in the company, this is typically something that you should do. And you should also, if you have more money coming into the company, you should make this, clear to all the stakeholders around you, because it shows that, your shareholders or you still, have a firm belief in what the company is doing. Another way, to look at this is to offer your services or products at a cost below cost price. So I'm making a little bit of a step aside, and I'll give you an example. So let's assume, I hope you can follow me, because I mean there will be some arithmetics in this. Assume that your costs are 100 per month and your revenues at this point in time are 75. That actually means that you have a gap of 25. Now, if you have a working capital position of 125, that would actually mean that you're able to finance your business, I mean, for another 5 months before you go bankrupt. Now, if you would offer services at a loss or at cost, that might increase, I mean, your revenues. So if you gain 10 in revenue, I mean, then your loss would go down to 15, and that would mean that instead of the 5 months, I mean, you're able to survive, I mean, much longer. So it is possible, I mean, to get some revenue in, which doesn't mean that, I mean, your profit, I mean, would go up or you would get closer to profit, but it would delay the points where you run out of cash. So it is something, I mean, to think about. I would, however, warn you, preferably you will not do this, I mean, in the market segment that you're working in. So if you could find a market segment where you've normally not been active, and you could offer that type of service, it is an option, I mean, to extend the moment where you go bankrupt. Now, apart from shareholders, I would typically look at people that are close to you. So you could ask your family, people that you know, to become a shareholder or put a loan in the company. What I've seen so far in most of the countries that I've been working in, this is the easiest way of doing it. But you should have, I mean, a good story, because I mean, they will need to believe with you that there is continuity within the company. Another way of looking at this is, I mean, to look at the governments. Now, this is very different in each of the countries that, I mean, I've been looking at so far. To give you an idea of what's happening in Europe, here, the governments, I mean, are sponsoring, I mean, companies up to 80% of the salaries of people. So large amount of money goes into the economy, to keep people, I mean, active and employed. Now, I know that there are a number of countries, I mean, that will help companies, I mean, through a number of schemes, and that ranges from not paying tax at this moment up to subsidies, I mean, to help them. So you should be fully informed of what your government is able to do for you and apply as soon as possible, because that may help you, I mean, in terms of survival. The third one that's on this sheet is assets. Now, if you have assets, and I would be thinking that, for example, you own the building that you're in, but it could also be cars, for example, you could sell these assets. That will free up, of course, money, I mean, to put into the company. It's not something that typically can be done overnight, but it is an option. Now, this is, I mean, where IT and BPO companies are normally, I mean, not the type of companies that have a lot of assets on their balance sheet. But if you have them, it's definitely a way, I mean, to free up some working capital. So if you have it, I mean, you may be lucky and are able, I mean, to get some money out of that. The next one is customers. Now, this is not an easy one, but I know that, I mean, for some of you, and specifically, I mean, if you're delivering services that are recurring, your customers may be very depending on the type of service that you deliver. So imagine that, I mean, you're delivering your services to a company, and you tell them that you go bankrupt or you go out of service, yeah, then they will have a problem as well. So they will be potentially be allowing you, I mean, to do whatever in terms of, I mean, charging them upfront or whatever, or getting a share into your company, just to mean to be able that you as a company will survive, which will mean that in their view, they can continue their service. It is a bit of a risky one because, I mean, you show that, I mean, you're vulnerable, which nobody will like. But again, I mean, these are times where everything is different. So it may be a position that you want to take. And sometimes, I mean, I've seen that your customers, I mean, are willing to support you. And this certainly goes for larger companies that work internationally. Now, the last one that I'm looking at is the banks. Banks are difficult. They are difficult anyway, because, I mean, but you could at least give it a try. But it is for a good reason that they're the last one on this sheet. Nevertheless, sometimes, I mean, you can get some credit, and if you're able to do that, and maybe because of the assets that you have in your company, that's something that you could try as well. Can we have the next slide, please? This is about communication. I think this, at this point, this is key. Typically, I mean, you're in a position that if everything goes down, I mean, you're losing business. I mean, you want to sit still and not tell this to anybody. But remember, I mean, this is a very unusual situation we're in. This is happening to everybody. There are hardly, as you can already see, I mean, from the poll as well, companies that are growing, and they're fortunate. So most of the companies, I mean, are having problems. And it's good to talk about it. You need to talk about, first of all, to your staff. Now, I've been around, I mean, for some time, and I did quite a number of reorganizations in my life. And typically, I mean, what I found out is that your people know what's happening. You may want to think that, I mean, they're not fully aware of what's happening, but they are. The bad thing is that they always fear for the worst. So they think, I mean, they're not going to be employed for longer and that the company will go bankrupt. I mean, that's typically, I mean, what they will think, because they cannot influence, I mean, the policies that you're applying. So if you talk to them, and you can be very open on this, because this is, the COVID-19 is not your fault. I mean, it's something what is happening to everybody. If you keep them informed, you can keep them closer to you. And it will also mean that they're willing, for example, I mean, to come up with ideas on how as a company you could survive. And that could go from, I mean, pay my salary somewhat later, or part of it, skip my bonus, etc. And they may have some ideas that would surprise you. So communication with your staff is key. The same goes for customers. You need to keep your customers close. So you need to talk to them. And what you actually, first of all, want to tell them is that you're going to continue your business. So it's going to be hard for you. And if they can help you, that would be great. But they need to be assured from the fact that you will be able to continue your business. And that doesn't mean that you need to call them every day, but it's good to be in contact. Give them a call now and then, maybe send them an email, and talk about whatever you're doing, which could potentially be a success for you. And that could range from small things as well, like, I mean, getting a certificate for something, getting a new customer on board, or a new project that you're starting, or that you're starting a training for your people, for example. There are all kinds of things that would indicate to your customers that, I mean, you're alive, that you're thinking, and that you're trying to push things on. Important. The other thing is talk to your mentors. It's typically something that, you like to talk to people when you're successful, but it's also good to talk to people when things get rough. And that's typically, today. So your mentors could be, your other shareholders. This could be your professors from the university. People that you know within your Rotary Club or whatever. By sharing your problems, sometimes, you will get ideas, and sometimes, people are able to help each other. So, and it will definitely also mean that you will be less stressful yourself, because if you want to solve everything yourself, this is not easy. So if you can share your thinking, it will definitely help you and make you more relaxed, and a more relaxed person is, in my view, a more successful person. Talk about all your stakeholders. So not only your staff and customers, but everybody that's related, to your business. So we've already talked about the landlord, etc. But talk to, the people you're in contact with the government, the organizations that you're a member of, etc. Talking, communicating helps. One of the things, which is also in the paper that I've written, is that you can communicate, for example, on how you've dealt with health and safety regulations. It's good to show your customers, and also to your staff, that you're active on it and that you're hands-on. This is the easy part, and it's also good, to communicate about it. Can we have the next sheet, Sanam? Do your research. Now, this is not an easy one. So the world is changing, but is my target market changing as well? So you need to figure out, and that's not easy, what's happening. So in IT, are things moving? Well, I definitely know that everything that has to do with online is much more successful than when it's offline. If I look for example, what's been happening in Europe in the retail business, shops, of course, had a major problem because nobody wants to enter unless, you need to get food or something. But buying clothes, for example, not happening. Well, people actually do it because they buy online. So in terms of IT, yeah, the world is changing because this is a trend that was already happening, but I think it will accelerate, which is good for you, of course. So everything to do with online is good. All the things that are happening which are related, so big data, for example, it's happening today. And it will be more than ever, I think, part of what we see today. Another one, which is also involving IT, is the fact that more people are working from home. So this is a trend which, in my view, will continue. If that's happening, that has implications for the ways that companies are organized and the safety of all the connections, etc. Again, this is in terms of IT, is a plus. But you should do research and try to find out, what's changing, and can you, make use of a trend that's actually happening. There's also a negative, and that could mean that there may be new restrictions or opportunities, coming up, and specifically the restrictions may be an issue. It could be expected, that, for example, governments will try to protect their own economies. So far, I don't see it happen, but typically it is something, where governments, will start thinking of. So if there are going to be restrictions, in terms of the economy or the way that, you as a company are allowed to enter markets, that's something that you need to be aware of. So follow that closely, and I think that CBI is able, to help you there. Are there new trends coming up? Yeah, I think, there's one trend that's typically, yeah, accelerating, and that's, in my view, the environmental driver. what I see is that the environment is becoming more and more important in terms of thinking. So that is something that you should have a look at, and potentially, I mean, you might be able, I mean, to make use of it. Can we do the next sheet, Sanne?
Yes, and I would like to mention to you that you have 5 more minutes.
Yeah, yeah. Good. Update your plans and prepare for the future. There's one thing that I would like to stress, and a lot of the companies that I'm talking to at this point of time are looking at entering the European market, and they're typically at the beginning of it. This is an extremely good time, I mean, to look for agents. Agents is, in my view, I mean, the best and easiest and most cost-effective way, I mean, to go to a foreign market. What you see with the slowdown of the economy here as well, there are people that have, I mean, part of their time available. So this is a very good moment, I mean, to start looking for agents. This is not a very costly thing, but it may get you business, I mean, in 3-4 months time. So look at, I mean, the type of agent that you want to hire, where they could be found, what your target market is, and start doing it. Relatively low investment in money at this point in time, but the rewards, I mean, could be great when you, I mean, start entering these markets. Invest in people. This is typically the time to do training. You could be on the job training that you could do yourself. Look at your processes again. I mean, are they as sharp as you wanted to have them? I mean, normally there are a couple of things that need to be done in any company. Well, this is time, I mean, to do it. We've already talked about, I mean, research. It's important that you know what's happening. There are some other things. I mean, you could also look at corporate social responsibility. There are a number of programs that CBI is running. You could get certificates that will help you, because, I mean, this is something which will improve the quality of your company. And the same goes for certification. If you want to go through a certification process like ISO 9000 or 27001, this may be a good time to do it, because you will have some spare time. Can I have the next sheet, Sanne? Well, this is, I mean, I'm getting to the end. Out of the box thinking, you could think of new services. I see that, I mean, some companies already, I mean, are doing well and making use. This is also a good time to think about, I mean, can I innovate? Can I do something new? Was there something that was already lying there? We never had time to do it. New services, of course, I mean, might bring you in money longer term. And typically, I mean, this is the moment, I mean, to think about it. Another completely different way of looking at your business is, I mean, should I consider partnerships or even joint ventures? Now, partnerships might allow you, I mean, to do business in an easier way and to share some of your costs with others. If you take it one step further, I mean, you could even go to joint ventures where you actually put two companies together, a complete merger, or, I mean, you come up with something that you do jointly. If you do this jointly, I mean, your cost will go down, but your revenues might actually increase. Since a lot of companies, I mean, are facing the same type of problems as you are, this might be an option, I mean, to consider at this point in time, where if you put two slightly loss-making businesses together, I mean, it might actually be one business that's making a very nice profit. Can I have the last sheet for me then? I think it's not an easy time, but I would say go for it. Be active, be innovative, and most certainly, I mean, communicate. If you do that, I think with the strength that, I mean, you will have in your company, I mean, you could be successful. And that's what I hope, and I would say go for it. Thank you. Can you take over, Sanne?
Yes, one moment, please. Yes, here I am again. Thank you very much for your presentation, Peter. I hope that everybody found it as interesting as I did. Well, it's now time for the question and answers. The questions and answers from the questions from the audience, of course, and the answers from you. I've already seen a couple of questions coming in, and one of the questions that you may be able to answer here is what kind of long-term effects you will see of COVID-19 on our industry?
Yeah, I've talked about that, of course. It's uncertain because I mean it starts with the question. I mean, how long? I mean, will this be here among us? So if we find a vaccine, or I mean, there is a cure, then it could, I mean, be a relatively short period of time that we're living with it. I always think that if you look at the stock exchange, that's a good indicator of what the world thinks is happening. Now, we've seen a dramatic fall, I mean, early March, but it has recovered, I mean, quite dramatically. So most of the shares are only 5 to 10%, I mean, below before this all started. So in general, I mean, everybody thinks that it will be okay over time. There are, however, a couple of industries that are hit pretty hard, and I hope you didn't have shares in airlines or, as I did, unfortunately, oil industry, because they came down, I mean, quite dramatically, and they have not recovered. So in general, the idea is that the airline industry, I mean, will be not good, and the same goes, I think, I mean, in terms of energy, which may have something to do with the fact that I think that more and more people are becoming more environmental oriented, and this may have an effect on big companies like Total, Shell, Exxon, etc.
Thank you very much. Apologies, I saw the screen was a little bit was not so stable, but I hope it will be from now on again. I hope the question was answered sufficiently, and I would like to go on to the next question. This question is, what type of agents do you recommend? What is the smartest way to approach them?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question because it's quite central in whatever I'm doing. I mean, with the companies that I'm helping myself. First of all, I mean, you need to understand, I mean, what the type of profile is that you're looking for. So you need to determine, I mean, what type of person am I looking for in terms of age, experience? Is there a real target market? Like, for example, IT is, I mean, too wide. So is there something that is specific to it? Then you need to look at a country because this has normally something to do with languages as well. If you're looking for somebody for Europe, you're thinking it's all English. But I mean, trust me, if you want to do business in Germany, you better have a sales agent that is German, because that's how it works. So first of all, you build a profile of a person that you're looking for. Typically, you can then do, and I would advise you not to do it yourself, but use an HR company to do it for you. Go to LinkedIn and try to find a number of CVs of people that match, I mean, that profile. Then you go from a long list to a short list, and as soon as you get to the short list, which will be something like 10 to 15 people, look at their CVs and send them an email which is specific for them. So not in general, hi, but I mean, make it very specific and then detail, I mean, what you are looking for and whether they would be interested or not. Typically, sales agents are people, and there are a lot of them at this point of time in Europe, that have a kind of their own consultancy company and are able to work for you on half a day or 1 day a week basis, where a large part of, their earnings could be not a retainer that you would pay them on a monthly basis, but a success fee for the business that they bring on. So the good thing is that you're not paying a salary. They're not on your payroll. But you would basically pay them, when they bring in business.
Super, thank you very much, Peter. I would also like to get a reaction from our sector account manager for the outsourcing sector, Margot Lobbezo. She's also present in this webinar. I hope you can all see her, and she would like to add something.
Yes, when we talk about agents, we are currently having a guideline developed in which we will explain the agent structure in Europe and how it works in Europe. And that will also include tips on based on also what Peter has been saying on how can you actually approach an agent. Then there was also another question in how CBI can help. So first of all, it's the guideline, but as a sector account manager, I'm also looking into ways of how we can, as CBI, work on building those partnerships. But we need to wait for the research first, but that's something that we're planning on doing in the coming year. It won't be it won't be there next week, but the guidelines should be there around October.
Thank you very much, Marco. All right. Then I got this information from a person in Sri Lanka who informed us that the Sri Lankan government indicated that they are going to make it mandatory that all government organizations should purchase locally developed software, if that's available, of course. So that is a little bit in line, I believe, with another question that we got. That is, if COVID-19, if you think that COVID-19 will have political implications that may affect our business. Can you say something about that, Peter?
Yeah, I think it will. This is already, a point, and I addressed it in my speech as well, is that typically governments, will be trying to restrict things. So they want to keep it within the country or so. Whether that's good, long term, I guess not. But it's typically a first reaction of politicians, of course, to do something like this. I think there will be political issues, and I think the major one, I already talked about it, is in different industries actually. I think what's happening between the US and China will have an effect on the way that we source things, and this is about production. I think more and more, and I think this will be done by robots, for example. Western countries, will try to do more production, within their own countries. And of course, this isn't an overall effect, because this will have to do, with logistics as an industry as well. So there will be some changes, I think. Will that be overnight? No, this is long term. This is not something that will happen in 3 months or so. But it is a trend, and I think it's important to look at this trend. The good thing, for example, might be, if I look at Africa, for example, which is hardly hit so far. So let's assume that this remains to be the same. Then it looks a little bit like a safe haven in terms of, for example, tourists. I'd rather go to Africa at this point in time than to the US, for example. So yeah, there will be all kinds of implications, which have also something to do with, will there be a cure or a vaccine? As soon as we have a vaccine, then we'll get back to a kind of normal again. If the vaccine is not there, and if it's endemic, like influenza is, for example, then it might be a different ballgame. So there will be implications, there will be political implications, there will be restrictions. But on the other hand, let's not overdo it. We're not going back to the Middle Ages, and people tend to forget pretty quickly. I know that I've been in the SARS when I was walking through an airport, and I forgot about it completely, of course, I mean, after a few years. So what you see in Europe, for example, is that we're allowed, I mean, to go on holiday. Yeah, people go on holiday. That's what's happening. Is it to the same extent? No, but my guess is, I mean, if there's a vaccine, I mean, things will become pretty normal pretty quickly.
Thank you very much. And then, Peter, another question is, do you think that this pandemic will also affect positively in the IT outsourcing industry, even when it's over? And how should we get prepared for this?
Yeah, I think it will be positive because, I mean, if you look at underlying trends, and I always talk about, I mean, the companies that I'm helping about the demographics. Well, the demographics are not going to change. So, I mean, we have more older people. If you look at the buildup, I mean, of age, I mean, in Europe, we have many more older people than there are, for example, in Asia or Africa. That means that, I mean, we have less people working. So if I look at the IT industry, I mean, we have a shortage per definition, and that shortage is growing because of the demographics. Now, typically a recession, of course, I mean, will slow down this process, and we've seen this before 10 years ago, but the underlying trend is still there. So in my view, it will go on, and I think it will even be accelerated when the first fear is out of the air. So people, I mean, are allowed to travel again. Then we see that the trend is typically towards more online, more IT. IT is involved in everything. I mean, we've already talked about Internet of Things. It is happening. It is coming. And there are not enough people, I mean, to deal with it in Europe. So that means that, I mean, that industry is growing, which is a big opportunity, of course, I mean, for everybody who's in outsourcing in IT. For call centers, I mean, it's contact centers, it's a bit more different because this is very much language related, of course. But we also see that, I mean, the online companies are growing. Yeah, online companies, I mean, have customer support. I mean, this is not, I mean, the person in the shop. So this is a contact center, and it's either their own or it's a big one which is outsourced. And again, I mean, if you look at the demographics in Europe, I mean, we will be short of people. So also there, over time, there will be a positive trend.
Okay, I think this relates very much also to another question, because this person was a little bit worried because a lot of countries in Europe seem to be kind of turning in on themselves, so closing off and focusing on themselves in this period of time. So he was wondering if there are really new opportunities for them on the EU market after the COVID effect.
Well, of course, I mean, if you look at the companies at this point in time, or I would rather say a month ago, uncertainty is bad for business. So if I don't know where it's happening, I sit still and wait. This is typically been the situation in the first months of COVID. I mean, what we see now in Europe is that we're still looking at the US, where it's not going well, to our surprise in a way, because they should have done the same thing as governments in Europe should have done. And then I think the situation would have been a lot better. So as soon as the uncertainty is out of the air, companies, I mean, are more willing to do business again. And you already see that consumers, I mean, they start buying things. I mean, I see some of the numbers that really go dramatically up. We're allowed to travel again, which means that, I mean, we're becoming more certain of things. So in my view, unfortunately, we're now in the holiday season, which is typically, I mean, not the best season, I mean, to get new customers. But my guess is that in September, we'll more or less, I mean, start doing business in the way we did. So in my view, it will be opening up again. again, it will be maybe somewhat slower than to be expected, but think of the underlying trends. I mean, they're there, they don't go away. So it will come back in my view. And I think there are definitely opportunities in Europe.
Okay, good. So then there's one question about information security. So the question is, what are you doing on raising awareness on information security, considering the new way of doing things? IT infrastructure is the key concern, is the remark.
Not clear what the question is. I'll respond a little bit in a broad way. Security is the major issue in Europe, and it will become even a bigger one. We have the GDPR ruling, I mean, which was instated by the European Union. And I mean, it has already had effects, I mean, in Europe itself. So you need to be very careful in terms of, I mean, keeping your data secured, etc. Now, with people working from home, for example, yeah, that means that, I mean, you have security issues, of course. So there is a trend that, I mean, people work with more reliable software. To give you one example, a lot of companies started using Zoom, for example. Yeah, then a lot of companies said it's just not secure enough. So we want to use Microsoft Teams because that's something which is much better. Okay, Zoom has repaired a couple of stuff, but it still looks like it's more for consumers than it's for business. So businesses are very much aware about security. Now, one of the things, I mean, which you could do, and I alluded to it, I mean, earlier on, is to look at certification. There is the ISO 27000 series, so the 27001, which will certify you, I mean, for data protection, which is a major thing, I mean, to your advantage if you have it. So if you're a call center and you want to work for a European client, well, you better make sure that that's okay. Because, I mean, I would not trust you, I mean, with my information, and the fines, I mean, that the local governments and European governments, I mean, will put on you as a company are huge. So you're just not going to take the risk. So in that sense, I mean, that's something that you could typically work on. And if you're involved with something like that, it looks to me like 27001 is almost, I mean, a necessity.
All right. Thank you very much. And we have time for 2 or 3 more questions. So I call up on all attendees. If you have any questions, then please let me know. Then, yeah, there's one other question, but it's more about, not 100% sure. Maybe you can answer it, but I'm not sure. It's about the opportunities that would rise in logistics outsourcing. How can I export logistics services to Europe? But I'm not 100% sure if that is more in line with the IT and business process outsourcing that we are dealing with now. Can you say anything about it?
Well, no, not really. Well, of course, I mean, I talked about, I mean, the problems, I mean, European companies have with China. Because, I mean, the dependency and the just-in-time delivery of stuff, I mean, is something that, I mean, might really kill your business. So you looked at the car industry, for example. If you just miss one part that needs to be produced in China and you can't get it, you can't deliver a car. So there will be something like rethinking your processes on how you deal with it. But outsourcing logistics is, I mean, typically logistics is a thing which needs to be done, I mean, there. So I find it a somewhat difficult question. If it's related to IT, which is involved in logistics, yeah, there is a major opportunity there, of course, because you see that there is much more information in terms of logistics, where If I buy something online, I mean, I get information on where it is, when it's expected, I mean, to arrive. I can change it, whatever. So you've seen that the IT component within logistics has increased enormously over the last couple of years. So it is a major industry where I would look at if I would be in IT.
Super, thank you very much, Peter. Well, if there are no other questions from the audience, I think it's also, well, it's time also to continue the presentation of the market intelligence. Yeah, it seems that all questions have been answered, so that's really great. Well, first of all, we would like you to show you the link to the study itself, the full study that Peter wrote, and where you can read all the details of of what he has been explaining, and it's also more easy to take it to read it carefully and to take action upon it. Then I would like to tell you a bit more about our market intelligence. So as mentioned in the beginning of this webinar, CBI offers free market intelligence for different sectors, including the IT and BP outsourcing sector. And it's specifically aimed at exporters from developing countries to the European market who are looking into the European market. Well, we have market studies that are looking at the demand for the different services that you can offer, the trends on the European market, also what are buyer requirements on different services in this sector. Also, we have tips studies with a list of tips on how to find buyers. And also it includes some information about what we have talked about before about finding agents. How to do business. We have also a tip study on that. More also culturally, what is regular way of keeping contact, of communicating with your buyers. And also how to organize your export more practically. Then we have studies concerning the whole IT and BP outsourcing sectors, but we also have specific services studies. So, for example, a study on software development service, or a study on the Internet of Things, and on contact centers. But there are also on fintech services or blockchain, these kind of developments. We also provide studies. You can subscribe to our market intelligence newsletter, and then you get every month an update on our latest publications, and you can indicate for which sectors you want to be informed. Then two studies that I want to highlight more. It's not on the PowerPoint, but are specific studies that we have conducted on the European IT outsourcing market, with looking into opportunities for Senegal and Uganda, and also for IT outsourcing, but also a separate study for BP outsourcing. So yeah, because we have programs at this moment, support programs in Senegal and Uganda, we have conducted these studies in particular, and you can all find them on our market intelligence platform. And then, last but not least, let me see. I want to announce our next webinar, which will be taking place on Thursday, August 20th, at the same time as this webinar was conducted. And it's about exporting software development services to the European market, and the impact also of COVID-19, which will, how this will influence the exporting of software development services. So it's a presentation of one of the fact sheets that we have online. and it will be the webinar will be conducted by our market research organization, Globally Cool, in combination with sector expert Laszlo Klux. Then I have come to the end of the webinar. I will look one more time if there are no other questions. Let me see. No? Okay. Well, then I would like to thank everyone very much for your attending, and please let us know also how you found this webinar, if you found it useful, and if you have any feedback to us. There will be a survey coming up after this webinar ends. And yeah, then on behalf of CBI, I would like to wish you and your business lots of good luck, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.